I'm from. I'm from poppies and the twisted vines of Cabernet. From coffee shop happiness to buzzing, stinging blissfulness down a lavender walkway. I'm from stuffed to the gills in mottainai. From carne asada fries to cup ramen at night. I'm from love is patient, love is kind. From Sunday best to Shinto shrines. Curled up by the fireplace, gathered round the dining table, I've listened to my family's tales. I am from the war-torn, the immigrants, the meek, hard-working, earnest, furthest from weak. Generations that chose that road less traveled by. Strong men and women, more than what meets the eye. I am from the ashes, where the phoenix rises, hopeful, adventurous, a life full of surprises. I'm from two worlds, bridging together as one. I don't know where I'm going, but I know where I'm from. Hello and welcome. My name is Erika. I'm a teacher here at Seisen International School, and I teach language and literature. Today I'm going to be talking about embracing liminal identities. Now, a few years back, I wanted to return a textbook, and I went up to the counter, handed the textbook, but the cashier looked me up and down and said, "What are you?" I thought maybe I misheard, but the person said it again. "What are you?" I'm human? I don't know what you want from me. And he said, no. I mean, where are you from? What's your ethnicity? I sighed, and I went into my 5-second rehearsed bio that I've always said all my life. Well, I'm half. My mom's Japanese, my dad's American. My dad met my mom when he was in Japan. I grew up in America. Oh, cool. That's what I wanted to know. Can I return my textbook now? I've had so many interactions like these where I've ended up having to talk about my identity and share my whole life story with complete strangers. And now that I think about it, when I think about what that person said to me, "What are you?" that person probably genuinely didn't care about my identity or my family, but really was wondering, how should I label you? What box should I put you in? When we define people, it's a matter of convenience. We can label someone, we know how to organize them into our mental system, and then from there on out, we know where that person sits in our worldview. We know how to interact with that person, how to talk with that person. But what about someone like me? On my American side, I've been told that I'm not American enough. On my Japanese side, I'm not Japanese enough. I've even been told that I'm not Japanese American enough. So where do I fit in? My identity is somewhere between those defined and prescribed societal definitions. My identity is a liminal one, somewhere in between. So what are liminal spaces? In architecture, they're often defined as the transitional in-between spaces where people often go through them and then quickly leave, where they're forgotten or abandoned. Maybe some of you can connect to this, where you felt at some point in your life you don't fit into those prescribed spaces. Your identity doesn't fit neatly into one of the boxes that already exist. You lie in a liminal space. Today I want to talk about those identities, especially children and young adults who really haven't developed a strong sense of self, and they might feel that they are lost in that liminal space. As an educator, I have the wonderful privilege of working with children from elementary all the way up to high school. And one of the observations that I've noticed is that children, when they're young, they are just brimming with questions and answers. If you ask them, "Who are you?" they will confidently tell you about who they are and what they believe themselves to be. I've heard things like, "I love cats," "I'm an artist," "I'm caring," or "I'm going to be a unicorn." But then, as the children grow older, there seems to be a disconnect. When their minds were once filled with their passions and dreams, it becomes filled with the worries and expectations often put onto them by their teachers and adults around them. The poem that I shared at the beginning was actually an assignment that I gave my 7th grade class to start off our poetry unit. I asked them to write about where they're from. For me, I had a lot to say about my identity, so it poured out in a matter of minutes. But what I soon realized was that my class they really struggled with this. They didn't know where they were from. They didn't know where they belonged. And it was a challenge for them to express who they are. Their identity was lost in the liminal space. So, educators, how can educators embrace liminal identities, especially our students who might feel that they don't have a place, they don't have a strong sense of self? The first way is to build positive relationships. When I was in high school, a teacher called on me in front of the whole class and asked me and said, "Erika, how did your parents meet?" Followed by, "Did your mom marry your dad for money?" And even further, I heard that Japanese wives always walk 3 steps behind their husbands because they're submissive. Now, this was totally unprompted, completely unrelated to what we were learning. And you can imagine, I didn't know how to respond to that. In fact, I don't even remember what I said, but I know how I felt. Maybe that teacher genuinely was trying to build a relationship. Maybe that teacher was just innocently inquisitive about my life and my family. But on the receiving end, it was absolutely intrusive and so insensitive. And I never wanted to share about myself or my identity with my teacher. So then, educators, how do we build a positive relationship? We need to step into their liminal identities. Let the students talk to us. Let them share about us. Before you start asking questions, before you start imposing your belief systems on them, let them come to you and share what they think, what they believe, what they're experiencing. The other aspect that we can do, a simple step for building a positive relationship, is getting their names right. If you don't know how to pronounce it or spell it, just ask them. Take the time. What they care about is if you are making that connection, giving the effort to create a safe space. And when they're ready, they will come to you. They will share about their lives. The second thing we need to remember as educators is that identities are precious and language absolutely has power. In another experience, it was December 7th, we were learning about Pearl Harbor. The teacher asked me to read that section out loud to class. I did my part, I read that section, and I sat down. Teacher then turned to me and said, "Erika, what do you have to say for your people?" That one comment, maybe that teacher doesn't even remember saying that to me, but that one comment, I carried that with me from my teenage years into my adulthood. It became a part of my identity. It It made me ashamed for my Japanese side. It made me feel guilty for something I personally didn't do. Language has power. What we say as educators can either build or can hurt students, even if it's a passing comment. Language has power and identities are precious. The last thing that we can do to embrace liminal identities is to represent them. Later on, when I went off to university, this was the first time that I was actually surrounded by a diverse group of people. I started to see people who looked like me, who spoke like me, dressed like me, thought like me, and I felt visible. It was the first time where I could feel comfortable in myself and start to share who I am. Educators, it's so important that we look at our curriculum. We need to amplify liminal identities by choosing texts, topics, and issues that represent them. We also need to consider what narratives are being privileged, which ones are being de-emphasized, and which ones are missing altogether. It's so important that our students can see themselves in what they are learning. But what about those of us who are just trying to figure ourselves out? How can you embrace your own identity? Now, I thought about how I could approach this, and I decided the best way would be to write a letter to myself, to my teenage younger self. So bear with me for this. Dear Erika, as your older, more mature self, there's so much I want to tell you. I know that you just want to fit in. You're of two worlds, but you feel like you're really in neither. You're stuck somewhere in between. You have to field so many questions about yourself, and you wonder, why do I have to answer so many questions about myself? Why do I have to work so hard to prove myself? Why can't I fit in? Why is my thinking so different from the people around me? Well, I'll admit, you're not going to have that answer, and you're going to be really working on that even in your adult self. But I can tell you the process that helped you understand who you are. And we're going to look at it through a literary approach. The first thing you need to remember, and it's not a no-brainer for you, is to read, read, read. You've always been surrounded by books. Like a cactus in a barren desert, trying to soak up as much as you can. And all the stories, the experiences, the truths that are in this world. You'll start with what you know, books that you have, and then slowly dip into some of the more complex, but still safer, comfortable topics. And then when you're ready, you'll dive into the vast sea of contexts, concepts, and conflicts. By now, you've got all that knowledge in your head, and you start to have this growing question. Who am I? What are my own beliefs? This is when you need to look at your life and study your life like you would study a story. Your background, where are you from? Your themes, the themes in your life, what patterns are emerging? The characters, who are the people that have shaped who you are? The events, what defining moments challenged or affirmed your identity? When you think you've got that sorted and you have a building sense of self, next you'll realize that you're ready to be part of a community. Now, some people, they have their stronghold beside them from when they're little, and they're ready to go out into the world. But for others, for you, Erika, you're going to need to forge new bonds, new connections, and that's okay. Look for people you can talk to, be honest with, who can challenge you. Whoever they are, They are going to empower you to have a voice. And finally, when you think you have that voice and you're ready to share with the world, become a storyteller. Share your unique story with the world. Tell people that this identity exists. Make yourself visible. Maybe it'll start with a short poem, a little creative piece here or there. But whatever way that you storytell, make sure that you're including the important moments, the emotions, the memories that are so dear to your heart. And my young self, I wish I could tell you everything that you're going to go through. Joy, love, happiness, but also heartbreak, unbearable moments, things that you don't want to remember. Whatever happens, always remember to read, keep analyzing, keep discussing, keep sharing. This will be the way to your identity, the path for you to understand yourself. And at some point, you'll realize that your liminal identity, it's not a forgotten passage. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's a celebrated promenade, a bridge that connects identities together. Thank you.